Good evening. I know you've only had a half an hour break, so excited that all of y'all are back and fresh-faced and ready for Sriyal's session today. Just to do a quick introduction to the panel right now, we have Sriyal, our very own FPA expert, and he will be imparting his knowledge and unique expertise on this matter. I am not saying it in air quotes. He's actually amazing at what he does, and we all here as well go to him for all our communication strategies and overall advice on matters. So I guess y'all should really take this time to pick apart his brain right now and get everything you need from him, because these are rare and unique sessions we're going to have with him. So today we also have with us Manoj and Ranaka. You know, this is our local FPA staff that are supporting this program. Thank you so much, Manoj and Ranaka, for coming in as well, and our interpreters as well. Thank you so much for doing a stellar job these past 3 days. Right now we have Sriyal, you can take over and maybe just do a quick introduction before the rest of the 40 come in.
Sounds good. Okay, so quick introduction. I am Sriyal. This is a knowledge sharing session. It's not a training of any sorts. This is information I've gathered over my time and things that have helped me do my job. I in no way consider myself to be an expert. We are all sort of learning as we go. Yeah, so primarily my work has been in advertising, TV production, some movies, basically in the space of sort of communication and mass media. Then I guess with touch of fate, I switched to development sector work. And even then I primarily was working as a comms person, as a media communication officer. And even though currently my role is as a project officer, I try to sort of take forward my comms knowledge with everything I kind of do. So yeah, that's about me. And you are going to learn today about how to sort of plan and strategize your communication campaign, or if you have a different project, the same kind of rules can be applied for it. So it's more of a sort of strategic way of forming your messages and your entire campaign and your project. So that is the introduction, Zainab. So should I just dive into it?
Go ahead, Sriyal, dive right into it. We're all ready, edge of our seats.
All right. Okay, 1 second. So if you have any questions during the session, please raise your hand up because I can see you and you'll come up and I will address it. If there is an issue with sort of the language or anything that isn't said that is not very clear, even through the translations, you don't understand some of the concepts or whatever that needs to be done, just raise your hand up. All right. Oh, I forgot on PowerPoint. Hold on. All right, can everyone see my screen or not? Can you see my screen now? Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So just in case, I have the chat box also open. So if you want to type something on there, that's also fine. All right. So throughout the sort of presentation, I'll be talking about a sample campaign. So I've taken my issue and tried to make an example campaign out of it. I've not done with it entirely, but we will work on it as we go. So my status, your problem. diving into it, you need to figure out what you can do best, who you are, and what are your strengths. So that is what makes the work that you do yours. So identifying that early on is important. I understand that early on in your work, it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint where you fit in or what you do, but just try to understand when you come to think of, oh, I want to do this really cool thing, try to figure out what makes you the right person to do that thing. Because like we spoke in a previous session, sometimes it might not be your story, but what puts you in the position to say that story. Maybe you have a unique point of view about that. Maybe it's not your own experience, but it is something that has happened to someone near and dear to you. So it can be framed in a way that becomes yours as well. And then addition to that, who are you that makes you and your work stand out among all of the work that has been happening outside. For my sort of example campaign, what I used is, I'm telling my story. So I own my story. It's my experience. And all this time, the work that has been done around HIV prevention or telling stories of people who are living with HIV has been done in a point of view from someone looking from the outside. So it's always their problem, it's their issues, it's bring them here and let them talk about their problems. For me in this campaign, it's mine. It's my point of view, and we're talking about how you're the problem. Example. It's just allegedly. So, I mean, it sounds corny to say like have a brand statement of what you do. It just means like a tagline for what does your project, what is your activity, what is your company, what does your work, what is it going to give to people that they would understand from the get-go that what to expect from this entire thing. For example, if you are going to be talking about, if you're going to be giving information about the LGBT community, knowing that how you're different, how have you then framed it in terms of the particular audience that you're going to work in? So, for example, if you're someone who's pansexual and you want to tell more pan stories, it could be you talking about, you are creating pansexual awareness, but you can be using sex, like Danu said, it's one of the key things. And it's one of the big, like sexual orientation itself is sort of grounded on sex. So you could be talking about sex stories from a pansexual point of view, or erotica from a pansexual point of view, not just an example. So for mine, what I used is emotional, educative, and individual-centric awareness on HIV, on stigma of living with HIV. So it tells you what to expect from either coming onto a Instagram or a Facebook, or even sometimes just seeing some of your work out there. It gives a overview what to expect with your work. And this is also not for anyone. It's for, it really grounds you to know your parameters of what are you going to be communicating, because if not, as creative people, sometimes it's very difficult to frame what we think and present it to another person, because sometimes there are multiple ideas and multiple things that are happening that you need real sort of direction to your work. So this would give you that. So then understanding your objectives and goals. So try to keep this as concise and clear as possible. This is what you think is that you would be able to achieve at the end of your work. So look at it as something at the end of my project, what do I want to achieve? And that would be your objectives. It could be short term, it could be long term, it could be something that you get to pick up as you go. All right. So for 1 second. All right. So basically for my work, what I would be doing is I would be providing up-to-date scientific information about HIV, and I would generate awareness about living with HIV. So it's two-faceted, and it is about awareness and giving information, and also part of it is storytelling as well. So try to really sort of narrow, keep it broad, but look you want to achieve and put it down as a goal that you want to achieve. Another sort of really crucial thing that you could be doing with the objectives is having it to be time bound and goal oriented. So if you want to achieve something by a set date, generally when it comes to awareness, it's very difficult because it's hard to quantify how much of awareness is created over a period of time. Oh Lord. Sorry, I'm just like all golden. But so yeah, so that is where you keep your objectives at. Okay, so the next question you need to ask yourself is, okay, so you now know what you want to achieve, but what's crucial about what you want to achieve is how are you going to achieve it? And part of that is who are you talking to in terms of trying to achieve your goals. Your audience and understanding exactly who they are, what kind of needs they have, what kind of tensions they have, what kind of content they consume is very important. Depending on how big and how strong your work is, the more details you have about the people that you are trying to talk to gives you more direction in order to
ලැබෙනවා වඩා හොඳ දිශානතියක් අරගෙන වඩා හොඳ sannivedanayak වඩා සාධනීය sannivedanayak.
If you have seen the Pepsi advertisement a couple of years ago that completely sort of missed the mark on millennial words.
உங்களுடைய வார்த்தைகளை தடுக்க அங்கே பின்தொடர்பவரின் போக்குகளானவை உங்களுடைய பார்வையாளர்களை புரிந்து கொள்ள முடியாது போகும். அது பெரிய அளவில் உங்களுக்கு பின்தாக்கங்களை ஏற்படுத்தும். அதேவாறாக பார்வையாளர்கள் உங்களுக்கு நீங்கள் செய்யும் வேலைகளை எவ்வளவு ஏற்றுக்கொள்கிறார்கள் என்பது முக்கியமானது. 3 விதமான பார்வையாளர் மக்கள் இருப்பார்கள். ஒன்று நீங்கள் பேசும் பொழுது, ஒன்று நீங்கள் என்ன சொல்வது என்று கேட்டுக்கொண்டிருப்போர், இன்னும் சிலர் அவர்கள் உங்களோடு சேர்ந்து கொள்ளாதவர்கள், எதிர்மறையாக செயற்படுவார்கள் நீங்கள் சொல்வதோடு. அதற்கு பின்பு இன்னும் ஒரு இரண்டுக்கு நடுவில் இருப்பவர்கள், நடுநிலையில் இருப்பவர்கள். நாங்கள் ஆரோடு பொதுவாக பேசுகிறோம் என்றால் நாங்கள் இந்த நடுவில் இருப்பவர்கள் உள்ளது. நீங்கள் ஒரு நாமத்தோடு வருமானத்தை தேடி உங்களுடைய வாடிக்கையாளர்களை நீங்கள் வளமாக்க வைத்துக் கொள்ள வேண்டும் என்றால் நீங்கள் ஒரு விழிப்புணர்வு ஏற்பட வேண்டும். தகவல்களை கொண்டு வந்து நீங்கள் செல்வதோடு ஒத்திருப்பவர்களோடு தான் நீங்கள் பட்டுக்கொண்டு, நீங்கள் ஒரு கம்பெனி கதையை கொண்டு வந்து இருப்பதென்றால் அவர்கள் உங்களோடு இருப்பார்கள். உங்களை எதிர்ப்பவர்கள், வெறுப்பவர்களோ விரும்பாதவர்கள், பொது தளத்தில் நிற்பவர்கள், அவர்களையும் நம்ப செய்வது மிகவும் கடினமான, அதற்கு ஆண்டுகள், பல தந்திரோபாயங்கள் என்பன எடுக்கும். உங்களோடு ஒத்துழைப்பவர்கள், இணங்கி போவர்கள், மாற்றத்துக்கு திறந்து இருப்பவர்கள், தகவல்களை உங்களிடமிருந்து வேண்டி நிற்பவர்கள், அத்துடன் மாற்றத்துக்கான ஒரு புரிகையை கொண்டிருப்பவர்களோடு ஈடுபடுவது சுலபம். உங்களிடம் ஏதாவது பற்றி கேள்வி இருக்கிறதா? நான் மழை ரெயின் போறது மாதிரி போகிறேன் போல இருக்கிறது. கேள்வி ஏதாவது இருந்தால் கேளுங்கள். நீங்கள் நான் சொல்வது சரி என்றால் பிரச்சனை இல்லை. என்ன சொன்னேன்? நான் கேள்வி கேட்க தொடங்க போகின்றேன். நான் என்னோட கேட்பது போல கேட்க விரும்புகின்றேன். பொதுவாக நாங்கள் பார்வையாளர்களோடு சேர்ந்து போகும் பொழுது நாங்கள் பேசும் ஆட்கள், நாங்கள் புள்ளி விவரங்களின் பிரகாரம் நாங்கள் எவ்வளவு நுகர்வோரை வைத்திருக்கின்றோம், அவர்கள் மாறும் கருத்துக்கள் மாறக்கூடியவை. சிறந்த வழி என்னவெனில், இதை நீங்கள் சூழமைவிலிருந்து நீங்கள் செய்யும் வேலையிலிருந்து கட்டமைப்பு கொண்டு நண்பர்களுடன் பேச வேண்டும்.
Yes, no surveys and sharing with people that you know, sending it out on like putting it up on your social media. If you are on Instagram, you have a decent enough following. Understanding what your following is can really help the kind of content you create for them. You can just do it as easily as putting up a story with a yes/no answer, and understand which way does your sort of audience's opinions are at. So the demographics are important in terms of if what gender do they identify with, or if they don't believe in gender construct at all. This depends on this kind of is important because as much as I also don't like the idea of having to sort of conform to the binary and work on that direction. Unfortunately, when you work with Facebook or any type of social media advertising, you will have to segregate your messaging based on the audience. I don't know how candid I can be with you guys about some of the tricky things that we've done in order to reach queer audiences. It's borderline. I mean, it is ethically borderline, and I'll say it. So when we were trying to do this campaign for HIV on launching Know For Sure, the online HIV test booking application, on the social media campaigns, we wanted to reach trans and queer folk, or mostly MSM, which is men who have sex with men. There are behavior patterns that we see that are persistent within our audiences. So we ended up switching likes and dislikes. For example, we selected the audience's gender to be male, but who are interested in how do I frame this? In sort of feminine products, interested in makeup, all of these sort of things that we would sort of generally understand as things that are used to target for females. We just switched the gender, and it actually worked. I mean, don't quote me anywhere. I never said this, but it happened, and it happens. Unfortunately, or fortunately from our standpoint, Facebook knows who you are. Like, they may not know your name, but you don't have to explicitly say that you are your sexual orientation is this. If you are inclined towards liking same sex, they probably know about it right now. So at one point there was a option on Facebook where you can target towards the people that you're interested in. You know, on your Facebook profile, it says interested in men, interested in women. So that was then offered to advertisers to utilize it from their standpoint. So I'm saying all of this is to help you understand that knowing the person that you want to talk to, that you want to change, or you want to consistently keep within your framework is very important. The more you know, the better it is for you. So some of the other key things is, what do they like? What are their sort of interests, and what do they find challenging? What kind of, I mean, you can go to the point of what kind of devices do they use? Because if you know someone has an Apple phone, you kind of get a sense of that person's personality, or what that person's aspirations are in terms of consuming something. Why that is important is, when someone identifies with a certain brand, they also subscribe to that brand's value system. And for example, something like Apple, they have positioned themselves as a innovative, sort of break the boundaries type of mindset. If you look at their commercials, if you look at the work that they're doing. Why this is important to you is, when you go back to Facebook to do your advertising, you can then select people who identify with certain kinds of things. So building these profiles for yourself early on with any kind of work that you're doing, very important. You just have to know about it and put it down on paper, keep it for yourself. All right, so next is, once you know who you're talking to, you need to know what you're saying to them. And this is also heavily dependent on your audiences. Is it going to be an emotional conversation? Is it going to be argumentative? Are you sort of going to be more logical in your sense? All of this depends on who you're talking to. Because, for example, if you're trying to convince older people to be open to queer ideals, how do you then position it? How do you position your messaging? So, for example, when the same-sex marriage campaign came out in the US, they had a ideological struggle, because as queer people, some of us are interested in the institution of marriage, some of us aren't. Yet, since this has a legal consequence, there needed to be people sort of brought in order to frame it in such a way that general public would identify with it. So what they tended to understand is, you need to tell your story, but in a way that someone else would want to listen to it. So when they did some of these sort of face-to-face sort of group campaigns and things like that, they was talking to a set of executives, the villain of the era, older white men, and they tried to, how do you tell these people that gay, lesbian, bisexual people need to be able to marry their own gender, and that should be okay? The conversation starter was that they tried to remind the people, they asked them questions about their spouses, how they met, what was their first anniversary like, if they had kids, what was that experience like, and just really sort of got into a very comfortable conversation about the participants' family and their loved ones. And then they brought it around and asked them, so do you think this amazing experience that you've had should be experienced by other people? Would you ever deny it? Like, would you think about sort of sharing this experience and being able to have it? And obviously they said, yes, everyone should experience it. It is something that is sort of amazing. And then bam, they brought the understanding of, well, I mean, in that case, you wouldn't, as someone who understands and appreciates it, wouldn't deny this to a queer person because it's similar for them. So taking that conversation out of the rights-based approach to an emotional approach really worked for them. The same approach was done in Ireland when they were doing it. They understood that family values are strong among the majority Catholics in Ireland, and the messaging for the equal marriage campaign there was also framed around family values. So they had a commercial where a grandmother was talking about her lesbian granddaughter and said, I don't want to be the one to kick my family out because as Irish people, we don't do it. And these have really strong sort of consequences, because when you know the person, or when you know your audiences, you could be telling what you want, you could be getting done what you want, but it's just a switch in how that is being said can either make them really sort of be excited and sign up with you, or may sort of scroll on to the next thing. So I hope you understand the importance of key messaging. So the next thing is the channels. Basically, you are looking at an overarching sort of channel for your audiences. You could be looking at your 1 or 2 audiences that you want to speak to, and what kind of different channels that you will be talking to. Understanding where you primarily want to reach your audience, is dependent on your audience, but also the budgets that you have, the kind of change that you want to make. All of this will also narrow down where you can speak to someone. Obviously, when we are doing sort of LGBT advocacy, the kind of budgets that we will have cannot produce TV content. You can't buy ad spaces on a TV channel because you wouldn't have that kind of money to do it. So you have to then understand what are your limitations, but also most importantly, what does your sort of audience consume? For example, if you are trying to talk to young people, you can't be doing it on, for example, radio might not be your best choice. And even within social media, certain social media channels might not be your preferred choice, because you have to understand where your audience is hanging out at this point. So right now, everyone is all buzzed about doing TikTok trends and sort of TikTok challenges and things like that, because like it or not, like a lot of people do consume this information. And we'll talk about content at a later point, but it's understanding that where your audience is, what is possible for you, will define where you are going to be talking to them. Then your messages, sort of, again, have you guys seen this meme where people put up like different pictures of themselves and show, this is me on LinkedIn, this is me on Facebook, this is me on Tinder, or this is me on Grindr, this kind of, or on Twitter, basically sort of giving you an overview of the kind of, I mean, I don't have that meme with me, but it's kind of giving you a sense of what social media channels, like what is your persona on these individual social media channels. That's the basic understanding. If it's Facebook, it's very casual, but if it's Tinder, there's a slight sense of sex, or you're trying to sort of portray this person that is appealing in some level of whatever. You get the point. If it's LinkedIn, it's professional. So this kind of should give you a sense of where you are talking to your audience and how and what you're saying to them changes. Similarly, I think what Danu was saying, like in broadcast media, you can't say sex, you can't say certain things, but how do you then frame it in a way that is approachable and consumable? So having an understanding of, you don't look, if you're seriously looking into getting into communication campaigns, drawing these things out before your campaign is great for you. But even if you aren't, having some sense of what is going to happen and that pre-planning will give you an edge by preparing you to sort of be ready as you go. Tactics are usually things that you would produce. For example, it could be anything from like things that you are providing for people. So say if you are someone who's thinking about giving information, producing small consumable pieces of information about, say, what does gay mean? What does lesbian mean? What does trans mean? In a way that is shareable. These are what we call tactics in terms of things that you can give to audiences and have them understand what you're trying to say, and it's an extended thing. And yes, so the campaign basically, so the campaign basically would be the campaign that you are going to be running, and how are you going to be doing it in multiple phases? How are you planning it? Having a sense of, so generally in advertising, I mean, Natalie is here, you understand that you have to generate interest among your audience. So these teaser campaigns and then the launch of the campaign, these are sort of parts of your campaign. Just knowing what you're doing at each individual point and how is that contributing to your larger goal is important. The next important thing is, in terms of your objectives, how are you going to then measure your objectives? If you say, I want to generate awareness among people about HIV-related information, how can I measure my success at the end of 6 months? Does anyone have any thoughts about how I could measure it? For example, I'm running a social media campaign with young people in doing HIV-related information. How can I measure my success about creating awareness? Cool.
Sriyal.
Yes. Minoli, you want to go?
Mohammed put his hand up first, so maybe I'll wait for the
All right, Mohammed.
Please.
No, go ahead, Mohammed. It's fine. It's fine. This isn't. Go ahead.
Maybe with the call to action, like call to testing for HIV, with the call to action at end of the campaign, maybe.
But would I know then if I? So call to action, yes, that's a good idea. Like a call to action is a great solution for understanding. I'm not sure if the HIV testing is, but we can add on to it. I mean, because my goal is about creating awareness. It's not about trying to sign up people for to come into the STD clinics. If my goal was increasing participants at HIV clinics, the sign up would be a great way to understand how many people are signing up and have I met a certain threshold of what I want to achieve or what I had initially planned. I'm talking about awareness because it's a very difficult thing to understand. Thank you, Mohammed. Anyone else?
So
Minoli?
use social media metrics of engagement and reach, like the shares.
That's a great metric, but unfortunately, we understand that these are also vanity matrices, which means these can be easily manipulated according to who you want to show this to. Because I mean, look, if your objective is to satisfy a client, then yes, I've always like likes, shares, comments is the way to go. Like, is there anything more that we can do? Like, can we test people's awareness in a, say you've launched your campaign 3 months ago, 3 months down the line, what can we do?
How about like a perception survey?
How would I do a perception survey? How, like,
out of the people that you're sure that your content has reached, you could ask them before and after going through your message how their ideas have changed about your
okay. All right, perception survey. That should be, that's a good way of trying to do it. But let's any other sort of opinions, any other options? Anyone else? Anyone else wants to contribute to the conversation?
Sriyal, Amila has put something in the chat box.
Right. Tools like Google Analytics. Yes, Google Analytics are great, but not all of us. Yeah, I think that's a great way of Dileka, by sending a Google form asking some questions. Yes, I think perception survey like Google surveys are really cool. How about we try like a competition among your participants? So again, it falls under engagement, but you need conscious action to be taken. I mean, right now, like Instagram like is just like your thumb, it's like driving, like you just know, you unconsciously end up liking things. I like the perception survey idea. Can we sort of then direct it a little bit more towards having one-on-one conversations, maybe like for Instagram, like a Q&A session, like to understand, because sometimes we tend to speak. Now, I'm doing it right now, is that we talk with the understanding that people understand what we say. But people, like everyone else, consumes from their standpoint and from their sort of experience and their understandings. So really trying to have this sort of engaging back and forth conversations with your audiences in a way can really shape how you are communicating further. So the sort of this is the purpose of these tools, that like things like Instagram and things like that. Yes, they're fun and they're borderline thirsty sometimes, but it's a part of relationship management with your audience. So these components are what we would be using in order to sort of understand and formulate a communication campaign. Is there any questions? Or are there any questions? For some reason, I think. Anyone? So does everyone understand what I said? Am I clear? Do you know how to sort of strategize your work?
I think Dileka has a question.
Dileka? Yes, go ahead.
Can you explain a bit more about the key messages? I didn't get.
Of course. Sure. One second. All right, so key messages are basically the messages that you use to communicate in your, so you have a campaign and you know who you're talking to. Your key messages are what are the main points that your campaign is based on. To do this, you need to really understand who your audience is. For example, are you going to have a emotional tone to what you're going to say? Depends on who you're speaking to. If you are speaking to, say, a urban, more professional sort of people who are, their interests are in technology and they have sort of a logical standpoint of thinking, an emotional key message may not work with that audience. But if you're looking at an audience that is driven by emotions, for example, say, if you're talking to younger generation today, we understand that there is a lot of, they're quite driven by social media. They're driven by the trends that are happening. They're quite kind of in the know-how of what's going on more than an audience that is slightly mature. So if we are talking to this 18 to 25 audiences, you can be a little less formal in your communication. You can, I mean, if you look at some of these YouTube titles and things like that that comes out, those are geared towards the kind of audience that they want to look at. So when you make your key messages, it's important that you understand who you're talking to. So identifying your audience. And then what you have to do is you have to understand what is it that you're communicating. So go back to your objectives and understand what are your larger objectives. Are you generating awareness? Are you trying to get them to do something or change something? So based on the audience, you then bring in your objective or your goal and include the solution that you intend for them to have. So as an example, what I used in for the presentation was that, so my objective was generating information about HIV. So one of my key messages is HIV treatment is advancing. Are you? So here I'm trying to sort of speak to an audience who doesn't have a lot of information, but also trying to give a solution to the problem, which is you need to be more informed. So these are your key messages when you are trying to identify your campaign. And under these key messages, there could be a lot of other components and other factors that are in. So for example, you can, once you have a main message, you can have a justification to it. So it's kind of like you can bring in the benefits of what you're suggesting and how it is providing a solution for the problem that you're identifying within your campaign. So is that much more clear, Dileka?
Yeah, thank you so much.
If it's not, just tell me, like just say it so we will try to understand. Anyone else has any questions around sort of the components that we were talking about? Am I that clear? I'm not known for someone who communicates really well verbally, so.
Diane is asking a question on the chat box.
Right, chat box. All right. So also could right, okay, so we could ask audiences about their opinions, keeping our content ongoing. That will definitely make an impact on the campaign. My question is that, do we have to have a significant quality on our content to broaden the audience? Short answer, yes. Why is, there are multiple reasons. For example, what do you consume on social media? In terms of when you, what videos do you stop and watch on social media? What kind of content do you look at? That will also tell you kind of what are we conditioned to sort of look at these days. Try going back and looking at, if you get to watch a sort of older TV versus right now, I don't even know the type of specs that they have, but a high resolution video that is shot with a crane or a drone, there is a lot more engagement in in having sort of quality work produced. It doesn't mean that you have to limit yourself, but it just means taking an extra step to how do you make your videos look more cinematic? What kind of sort of theoretical approaches or practical approaches that you can take? It doesn't always take a crane to make a crane shot. I remember, so basically a dolly shot was done with a computer chair because it gives the same kind of effect. But so having a sense of quality, having using or making use of the technology that is available to you is always a good idea, and try to always produce better content as you go.
Thanks, Shreya.
Anything else before I start to deep dive into different things?
Hi.
Hi.
Sriyal, my
Ganga,
question
yes.
is, yeah, when it's come to that rural community, they are not familiar with that terms. Even they are not familiar with that LGBTIQ also. That my question is, if we are targeting that rural community, what are the tactics we can use to convince them?
Okay, so we are trying to talk about LGBT with rural communities. So again, understanding your audience here is important in terms of understanding what are their priorities. Equality and human rights probably are not at the top of the list. But however, I think family values would be something that would work with this segment of audience as well. You can sort of speak to them in terms that they understand, but also framing it in ideals that they understand as well. So which is why sort of the family understanding, the value of, and framing it in a way that they have some kind of stake to it. With the whole LGBT narrative, framing it as your son, your brother, your sister, your aunt, uncle, may have a better impact than the person who lives down the road. So if you want, you don't necessarily have to even talk about LGBT work or LGBT at all. But I think assimilating the audience, depending on how much time you have with this, is bringing them to a common understanding of the terminologies and setting the background for it is good, because then it'll make your future work easier. But introducing some of these concepts about dignity, respect, love, themes that are relatable, similar to what Shanuki said, about making that, like, how do you make LGBT their problem? Because right now, a lot of people don't think that LGBT problems are their problems because they cannot identify with it. So this is why framing that, talking to parents about if your child is, then would you treat them X, Y, and Z way? What, or you kind of show situations where, I mean, I know we were talking about empowerment versus empathy before, but somehow the empathy narrative helps people find something common with you. And then afterwards, you can shift that. Similar to what I said with the HIV thing, we've now managed to get the empathy narrative going and build an audience that is sympathetic towards the cause. So now shifting that towards empowerment is easy. But if you can't do it at the get-go, does that kind of answer your question, Ganga? Are you muted? Ganga, I can't hear you. 1 second.
Yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
I had a sound problem. Sorry, what was, okay, so you got it. Anything else? Do you need any sort of, does that answer? Okay, so Yashoda, go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity. So I would like to get know about more. How can we select the best tool to address the community or especially LGBTI community by based on their language fluency and cognitive abilities? Could you please further explain?
Best tool for, in what terms are you talking about? Like, are you trying to understand what platforms to use or
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
So like, okay, so similar to the previous conversation, LGBT people are as diverse as it comes. We just have like loose morals to a certain extent, in my opinion only. But we still consume similar sort of information, but again, within the LGBT community, what are you trying to say is important. What kind of information that you're trying to convey will help you guide you to decide what kind of platform you need to use. We understand that there are LGBT people in using all platforms that is available, but it really depends on what you want to talk about. So for example, if I go back to the HIV Know for Sure campaign, it was about sexual health. So being on a place where sex was discussed was key to the kind of messaging that needed to be done. So for example, we used a dating platform that is Grindr, I'm sure everyone knows, to push messages. But you would never use Grindr as a messaging platform for anything else. I mean, yes, you could, but depends, like you really have to frame it in such a way. So it's a space where we understand queer people or queer men at least hang out. And it's directly related to the kind of goal and objective that we wanted to create. There's the Know for Sure plugin that is happening on the chat box. There is a, so if anyone wants to know about Know for Sure and access sexual health services, there is the link to Know for Sure in the chat box. But yeah, Yashoda, does that help you sort of understand the platform? Because it really depends.
Yeah, of course, I got it.
You sure you got it? I mean, is it clear? Because I don't want, I mean, anyway, we can have one-on-one conversations depending on the campaign that you decide to create, what kind of strategies that you want to or you could be using. So I hope you understand. It really depends on the demographic of the LGBT person, your objective of what you want to achieve, and what kind of platforms does that demographic use. So that should then guide you to which platforms that would be best suitable for you.
Thank you.
Anything else? No, that's it.
Shamlan has a question.
Shamlan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. when it comes to video as most engaged content on the internet, maybe video, I think, and how
Shamlan, you are not very clear. Can you check the mic?
Is it clear now? Maybe it's
much better.
Much better.
So when it comes to video, is there a way to promote it without getting a lot of sponsorship or money, like using hashtags or using SEO or some technical stuff? Is there a tactic to promote video content without much sponsorship or anything?
Okay, so when you say sponsorship, you're saying about advertising, right? Like online advertising and things like that. Is that a way to get it across to people?
Endorsement and sponsorships, like from third parties or anything.
Sorry, so
is
okay,
there a way?
Well, there are multiple ways that you can get your content across. Help me understand, what is it that you're trying to promote, or what is the video that you're trying to get viewership, and what are the barriers that you're facing at the moment?
I'm planning to do, and I have done one or two, is about anti-bullying, bullying and anti-bullying, forcing someone's opinion on the others. Yeah. So what is the best way to get this message to certain audience and bullied people and victims of the bullying?
Right. And so you're saying that you don't want like endorsements from a brand of any kind or a person, but you want to organically reach
if I
people.
don't get any, like unfortunately, if I don't get any, is there a way to promote it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a little tough. The more networking you do, the more reach you can get. However, understand that social media platforms that has advertising on them have very specific algorithms to push content that is paid for. It's very difficult to break through that. We understand it's like a newspaper that charges for advertising. Sometimes even you wouldn't know certain articles that are produced are paid for by organizations and brands and companies in order to get an idea across to people so that it will sell something more for them. In your sense, I would say maybe look at who is working on bullying at the moment, say in Sri Lanka or in the region. And it's something that I don't hesitate to do is cold call people, meaning directly write to someone if you have their information. If you make a plea that is humble and genuine, chances are that some people would respond back. And there are some people out there who, say, for example, are doing Instagram pages or Facebook pages that would be receptive to taking your content and pushing it. Because when we do talk about content and content creation, this need for consistent content is always there. And as content creators, you probably who are there understand the struggle of having to constantly produce this. So there's also within the space people who take content that is already created and push it on their platform for a number of audiences or followership. So explore some of these options. The other thing is, like, similarly, there could be either an influencer or someone who's gained a decent amount of following who does talk about these kind of things. So trying to partner up with another person or an entity that already has a decent amount of following could really sort of boost you up in terms of pushing your work forward. So for you, what I could say is, if you don't want to if you don't have the means to push content through paid or endorsements, try to see if you can collaborate with existing influencers. See if you can reach out to people who might be interested in doing it. And the other thing is, like, talk to people who are working in the industry in terms of if you can network with them. Because sometimes there you might find people who are looking for things that they need to do, and it could be your opportunity to give something that you have created for them or create something for them. Helpful?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was lovely. Really. Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, no. Okay, so you may have been shared resources for the communication plan. I have shared something, an example of one that has been done. And there's a bunch of reading materials that has been put there. If you want to get a better understanding of creating audience profiles, setting smart goals, you can sort of deep dive into them with the resources. Is there anything particular that you all want me to sort of go into at this point? Or are you all okay with what I have said? If not, do you have anything specific to the work that you intend to do within this project that you want? Because you guys know that in a couple of days, you'll be shared a application for the fellowship, and you'd be asked to create your own sort of communication campaign or media advocacy campaign. So, and we wouldn't, if you need help, we would be there, but the mentoring would be on a need basis. So if you have any questions about what you're thinking right now, or you have no idea of what to do, this is an opportunity to kind of understand or get some help on things that you may be thinking about. No? Okay, so then I guess I'm going to start asking one by one about their work and how they would like to, how they have planned. Just kidding. So in terms of communication strategy, that's an overview of it. If you really need to understand certain things, there's a lot more that you can do specifically around audiences, as well as the kind of strategies that you would use to communicate to certain audiences. This requires a lot of pre-planning to your projects. Maybe I haven't gone into enough detail about some of these things, or maybe I have been extremely explanatory and you I'm completely clear. I don't know. I mean, I can go on talking until 6, but if you have very specific things to ask, this is an opportunity.
Sriyal, I have a small question that you may have already answered, but this is something that has been troubling me while I was creating my content. How do you adjust your content in a way that it, how do you like tweak your content to different audiences while you still maintain the identity of your brand and still get the message across?
Okay, so at any point, don't compromise who you are or your brand values just because you need to frame a question, like frame your content to a certain demographic or a certain type of audience. Because if you lose or compromise your brand identity, you would lose the existing followers that you have or existing sort of trust that has been built on your brand. So my advice would be to stay as true to your brand as possible. Do you have a situation that you are facing that you need the support with? Because then because some of these things are context specific.
Yeah. So what a little thing that we were trying to do during the 6 months is create a gender friendly children's book with a lot of like explaining to the children with like little stories of queer people, and like with non-heteronormative parents and family structures. So I mean, putting something out there like that, we have to be, I think, a little more sensitive in the way we present this content to the children, because it's an entirely different audience than what we are normally used to.
So you're looking at the general public on kids, and you're trying to create a book that that outlines or kind of creates awareness about and sort of that is outside of the sort of family structure of mother, father, son, daughter, right? Like you're just trying to say that there is more to that.
Yes.
And your audience, are you thinking about is as kids or the parents that?
So we want to get across to the children, but of course we'll need the approval of the parents, and we'll have to first get through to the parents in order for them to decide that our book will be a good learning opportunity for them.
Yeah, but just for example, look at it this way, right? If the age groups is below sort of 14 or 13, how many 14-year-olds have cash that is dispensable that they would take to a bookstore and buy your book, right? So then your audience, children becomes a secondary audience to you. It just has to be appealing to them when they get it. It has to get to them in other forms, right? So your then audience becomes the parents, or say an aunt or an uncle, or an adult that is associated with a child that needs to, so there needs to be a selling point to it as well. Because why would someone choose a book about family structures like that is gender friendly? Like, then does the general public really become your audience in that sense? So try to then, because if you really want the message to go across to general public, or in this situation, persons who don't practice sort of or practice conventional sort of family structures, you need to find a way to get in there. And that might be not calling your book sort of gender inclusive children's book, but rather framing it in a, like, I'm sorry, I don't know about your book, so I don't know if you are trying to tailor it by a, say, story. So for example, if it's Goldilocks story, like, are you trying to embed the value system inside the storybook? Because that might be a way in. Creating a buzz around your book for reasons other than the gender inclusivity and family structure sort of inclusivity is a good way, because the more people hear about something that is getting circulated, or even if it's among small networks, word of mouth is a sort of great tool to harness if you know the audiences and who you need to speak to in order to get something across. And word of mouth, I don't necessarily mean gossiping with people, but rather, for example, exactly, right? So like, if you can send this book around to influencers with kids and they think it's great, like that's an opening for you, because then it becomes more of a trusted source that is coming. I'm just gonna start telling you like random information. So the difference between a celebrity and an influencer is that people, general public, feels more relatable, like they can relate more to a social media influencer or an influencer of any type, because they see it as a version of themselves that has achieved something, or that they also can position themselves in that point of view and feel there's an aspirational value to it. A celebrity is a status that general people struggle to sort of identify, because in their lives they're not entirely sort of sure that they'll get to that point. So when you use influencers, I know there's a lot of debates about if influencer strategies work or not, but influencers do have a trusted followership. They have a way to sort of communicate certain ideas, but sell certain things that people would trust them. So which is why most brands also tend to use influencers to get their work across. And these kind of things are things that we also can use in the kind of advocacy work that we are doing, is endorsements from certain influencers. We have an influencer among us as well, to promote the kind of content that we create or the ideals that we are pushing out. You'd be able to reach a diverse amount of audience.
Thank you so much, Sriyal. Another small request. Can we please see
Yes.
Puppy?
Oh, she's old. She's not a puppy. She's a 1-year-old Chihuahua.
Oh my God, so cute. Hi, what is her name?
Her name's Lulu. Yeah, I have to take her to the hand, if not she'll. Okay, so we have a question from Hiran. Api mono hari poster campaign එකක් කරනවා නම් posters ලබාගෙන title body images කලසනදී භාවිතයේදී අවධානය වඩන ලබා ගැනීමට අපි සැලකිලිමත් වෙන්න ඕන සහ අනුගමනය කරන්න ඕන ක්‍රම පිළිබඳ හැඳින්වීමක් කරන්න. ඒක හරි, it's a lit me Hiran, the Sinhala channels මම මෙහෙමයි එතනදී දැන් මෙතන තේරුම් ගන්න ඕන එකක් තමයි අපි poster campaign එකක් කරනවා කියද්දී මෙතනදී posters කියන දේ අපේ campaign එකේ එක කොටසක් විතරයි. අපි කතා කරන්නේ poster campaign එක කරන හේතුව සහ ඒකදී කරන්න අවශ්‍ය. දැන් අපි කතා කරද්දී communication campaign එකක් කරනකොට
communication campaign செய்கின்ற பொழுது
එක්තරා audience එකකට එක්තරා audience එකක් වෙත ළඟා කරගන්න භාවිතා කරන tool එකක් තමයි poster campaign කියන්නේ. එතකොට ඔයා ඒ වලට භාවිතා කරන වචන සහ images ඔයාගේ overall campaign එකත් එක්ක සමාන වෙන්න ඕන. අපි campaign එකකදී visuals decide කරන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක ගැන කතා කරොත් ඔයාගේ campaign එකේදී ඔයාගේ නැත්නම් project එකේ goals objectives සහ ඔයාගේ audience එක කවුද කියන එක තේරුම් අරන් ඉන්නවා නම් ඔයාට එතකොට ඔයාගේ poster campaign එක ඒ audience එකට ගැලපෙන විදිහට හදා ගන්න පුළුවන්. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට අපි ගත්තොත් no for sure එක හරි sexual health සම්බන්ධව අපි දෙයක් කරනකොට අපි දන්නවා sexual health සම්බන්ධව කතා කරද්දී sex ගැන කතා නොකර බෑ. එතකොට යම් ආකාරයක flexibility එකක් තියෙනවා අපි සාමාන්‍ය වෙන දෙයක් කතා කරනවට වඩා අර sex කියන මාතෘකාව එක්ක මේ association එකක් build කරන්න. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට අපි ප්‍රීති එකේ social media campaign අරගත්තොත් එහෙම එයාලා ගොඩක් double meaning දේවල් කියනවා. කාලයට උචිත කියන්නේ දැනට වෙන සිද්ධීන් අරගෙන ඒකට මොකක් හරි double meaning කතාවක් දාලා තමයි ප්‍රීති එක මෙවන් කරන්නේ. ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඒක කරලා ප්‍රශ්නයක් එන්නේ නැති ඒගොල්ලෝ විකුණන්නේ condoms. එතකොට ඒ කොන්ඩම් එකත් එක්ක සෙක්ස් කියන දේ බැඳිලා තියෙන නිසා ඒගොල්ලන්ට පුළුවන් ඒ වර්ඩින් ඒකට හරියන විදිහට පොඩ්ඩක් සෙක්ෂුවලයිස් කරන්න. ඔතනදී තමයි අපි ওই වර්ඩින් කියන දේ සම්බන්ධව කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. කලර්ස් ගැන කතා කරනකොට කලර් තියරි එක ඇතුලේ එක එක කලර්ස් වලින් අපි එක එක ඉමෝෂන්ස් අපිට ඉවෝක් කරන්න පුළුවන්. මෙතනදී අපේ කැම්පේන් එකේ කොන්ටෙන්ට් එක අනුව සහ අපි කතා කරන ඔඩියන්ස් එක අනුව තමයි ඒ දේවල් ඩිෆයින් වෙන්නේ. දැන් අපි දන්නවා ඔයා දන්නවා දැන් අපි හිතුවොත් graphic design සහ art direction පැත්ත ගැන කතා කරද්දී design styles තියෙනවා. එක එක කාලෙදී ආපු designs තියෙනවා. design අපි identify කරන brands තියෙනවා සමහර වෙලාවට ඒ designs වලට ආවේනික වෙච්ච. අපි දන්නවා luxury හෝ යම් කිසි serious වගේ දෙයක් කතා කරනකොට බහුතරයක් පාවිච්චි කරන fonts සහ imagery තියෙනවා. ඒකෙන් අපිට තේරුම් ගන්න පුළුවන් ඒ දේවල් වලට දැනට භාවිතා වෙමින් පවතින patterns තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒවා අපි decide කරන්න ඕන අර ඔයාගේ campaign එක අනුව තමයි ඔයාගේ campaign එක කතා කරන audience එක අනුව තමයි ඒවා decide වෙන්නේ. Nishadi, starting a new website with LGBT friendly content, targeting audiences who are very new to these terms and who won't be running Google searches to find out content on these topics. When we say they won't be running Google searches, I mean, if you're actually doing a website and blog, make it Google friendly, because there are people who do search for everything on Google. But if you want to drive people who don't use Google, I think what you're trying to say is who are not, who use the internet based on sort of on a, they click a link and get.
Yeah, they must be online, like doing Google searches for other stuff.
But you're saying that people like
they won't be actually putting up a search entry saying what is LGBT and looking for that.
What I would do is I would see who influences the kind of people that you're talking about, in the sense who sends them WhatsApp forwards, who sends them a notice about something. I don't know if a glossary of LGBT would drive them necessarily to it, and I wouldn't necessarily use clickbait because that then people lose the trust in your brand. But take Bakamono, for example. They recently created a video with Pulse. I mean, the video is good, but that is a strategy that has been used, that partnering with people and networking with people who have audiences outside of your existing audience, but audience that you want to come into your platform, you then look at others who are in those spaces and look at collaborations in order to push certain things. So that's one way of doing it. The other thing is framing, why would these people come to your website is the other question. What do they have for them in this situation? Nishadi?
Actually, I don't think that there's an obvious game for them per se. I mean, say I would target people who run searches for the term sex, or like say erotica, but they are not necessarily looking for LGBT friendly erotica, but like normal straight sex. Mm.
Yes, no, so okay, your objective is to generate awareness.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And you want to inculcate, 1 second, guys. Sorry, guys, my medicine's just delivered. So in 2 minutes, I just have to step out. But Nishadi, what I was saying is that understanding basically or trying to convince someone about something that they already don't have a stake or need in is a bit difficult. So then you have to find channels that they listen to or look at what kind of content they consume and how do you frame what you want into it. Because if not, there are other ways of sort of rather tried and tested ways that are so passe that I would say try to find audiences who are associating them and who have a certain level of influence over them. So is it a child? Would they listen to what kind, who can convince them to do something? These are some of the, then you can use that audience in order to drive them there. Give me 1 second.
In the meantime, guys, if you have any questions, you can text it, type it on the chat box.
And make sure that you guys mark your attendance also.
Sorry about that. So are there anything more? Is there anything anyone else needs more clarity on? So does everyone know what kind of project they are trying to do and what kind of communication medium they're using? Or what is the primary communication medium? Okay, so let's do this. How many journalists are here? Hands up. Okay. So we have 2 journalists, 3 journalists, 4. All right, 5. Great. How many do we have who primarily creates work on social media or sort of social media content creators or storytellers primarily using social media platforms? Nice, 11. 7, yes. 12, 13, good. Great. So how many do we have who uses radio? Primary communication. And we're not saying using it as secondary, but who uses radio? This includes podcasts, talk shows, all of that. Primarily an audio-based sort of. How many filmmakers or visual storytellers do we have? Or visual in the sense motion picture driven. Five, 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 6, 7. Any other mediums like theater, like any other type of like anyone? So Isuru, did you say that what's the medium that you would be using?
No, Sriyal, it's a mistake. The social
so,
media and visual. Social media and visual.
Okay.
So small question.
Yes.
So you want to know the platforms that we already work on, or the platforms that we are planning on implementing certain programs on?
Well, basically, where do you have your primary presence at, or what is your main
right now
platform? Sorry.
At this point, yeah.
At this point, or you intend to, it's fine. Like whatever it is that you know that you are, okay. So if you're a filmmaker, you primarily identify as a filmmaker, but you may have social media campaigns and Instagram sort of profiles and things like that, but your core is at a filmmaker standpoint. So what I'm trying to understand is what are the disciplines that are used in terms of where do we have our fellows, what kind of areas are they working in primarily? Okay, YouTube, I would say it's part of social media. Cartoons, that's interesting. Moderating, okay. Yeah, what do you mean by moderating? In the sense, do you mediate conversations, or how? What's the platform? Okay, so we have websites is yes. Television, I would say television falls under filmmaking and sort of like sort of creating motion picture stories. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I just also want to understand, given that this is a LGBT sort of media advocacy related fellowship, what kind of area are you looking at providing guidance and information in? So let's start with awareness. How many of you are trying to create more awareness as a primary goal?
Guys, if you don't know how to raise the hand, there's a button called more.
There is, yeah,
reaction button. And there's a option called hands up. raise the hand.
Okay, so we have 11, 12 persons looking at creating awareness or generating awareness. When I say awareness, I'm talking about sort of LGBT related work. So how many of you, your primary goal is about talking about discrimination and injustice or harassment? Six, seven, eight. All right, so how many are looking at providing platforms for other queer people? In the sense, it's not about generating awareness, but rather encouraging more spaces. All right, that's nice. So that's about 12. How many of you are looking at empowerment of queer people? Empowerment, expression, bravery, anything that is positive and not positive, like queer people sort of feeling positive about themselves and feeling empowered and having agency to do what they want. Okay, the 12 people, please hold your, I don't want to do this, but anything else that is in the space of themes and topics that you would be using? Just share them with me on the chat.
Yes, I want to focus on the rights of LGBT community.
Okay, rights, in the sense from a legal standpoint, is it, or from like a current situation standpoint?
Legal one.
Legal one, okay. All right, so.
Hi,
Hi,
Sriyal.
Fran. Yes, yes.
Yes, now mine is sort of like, I don't know, it didn't fit to any of the topics which you mentioned.
You use satire to tell stories.
Yes, that's just so I thought of course, not making it conventional, like directly, as I told you, I don't directly give the message. So I have this my own unique way. So it would be, of course, is empowering. And at the same time, it's like sort of, I try to keep it lighthearted because I want my audience, like the already existing audience, so that they could relate as well. So it would of course be empowering, and it would be lighthearted. So, yeah, so that's what I wanted to say.
I would also say your primary core is entertainment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you have agency with what you have created, but entertainment is where you sort of really push the bar, like you keep doing things under the entertainment category.
Exactly.
Right? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Tarindi, you had your hand up.
Hi. Sorry, I actually wanted to ask a question. So most often in social media, usually we try to reach all kinds of crowds, right? But when we try to sensitize or advocate or give awareness, it's only like a certain kind of people who will actually get what you're saying. So you have this scale of people that you want to sensitize who are sort of like but then like you can maybe nudge them into like a little bit of direction, and then you have the people who are
ඉන්නවා. එතකොට මම හිතන්නේ ඔවුන් ඔබට එක පැත්තකට ඇදලා ගන්න
people who will stick to their ground no matter what. But also one of the things that's common in getting a certain kind of audience, but also a lot of audience, is by selling empathy, like empathy as a commodity. So I mean, we use it in everywhere, in like commercials, soap commercials. We even like sell mother's love as a commodity to, you know, get an audience. So you sell empathy, in return you get a huge number of audience. So for example, I've seen, let's say you put out like a post about LGBT people and how they deserve love. People will, like, you know, come and narrate you, this is not good, but if you put out like a violent video of an LGBT person being discriminated, and then you put in a caption like "බලන්න මේ මනුස්සයාට මෙහෙම මෙහෙම දේවල් කරන්නේ ඇයි කොහොම," and then like බුද්ධාගම හරි මොකක් හරි ගාව ගත්තත්, then everybody is like, oh my god, yes, like, you know, we should show compassion. And it's a tactic that works in a messed up way, because we are also a guilt-driven culture. I don't agree with how that works, but
Sorry? I don't agree with how that works.
Yeah, I don't agree with using that tactic, because you give information for the sake of giving information, not by, you know, putting something else at stake to give out your point. But that's used so much, especially in like YouTube. And I also remember Estelle Diaries, like, you know, there was this whole thing, like, you know, the whole purpose of that was going to beggars and being like, "Ane balanna me kenawa me lamai dala givilla paare inne ayi mehema karanne," and then everybody's like praising everyone and all of that. So it's a tactic that really works, but I don't agree with it. My question is there any other approach that we can take to target these audiences without guilt?
You mean target people who don't identify with queer lives, is it? How do you get them to identify with it without pandering to sort of empathy or sympathy?
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, so when this came up during Chanaki's discussion also, there's a lot of things happening here, right? On one end of it, the narrative of the disillusioned or the sort of disempowerment of queer people or them facing violence it's not universal, but it still happens, right? So in a certain sense, it is someone's story at some point. That's one existence of it. But on the other end, yes, it's not all of our stories, and it's wrong to keep using that and sort of not tell the other side of being queer as well. Other strategies to work towards getting people's or buy-in on something that they don't feel they can relate with. I mean, you use, so this is what it is, like certain themes like family, love, sort of empowerment is one of them, sort of throwing against that sort of hero's narrative in terms of regardless of so many sort of situations, this person has sort of risen up, kind of that placing. Those are other stories that exist, but it's not as effective as the empathy-based story. So it really falls down to the storyteller to decide if you want to pander to empathy and because I also don't think there is a lot of change that happens because of the empathy narrative that is that can be that is tangible, that will happen, that you can measure then and there. It's not like you show a sort of video about a person getting beaten up for being gay, and then the next day that person would go and vote for like LGBT equality. I think looking at communication as a whole and looking at it in more than a small time frame, if you tend to look at it, say, in a 2-year, 3-year sort of stretch, then you can build up a certain type of audience. So for example, you can take your audience through a journey from telling the sympathy stories, getting them to come into sort of your framework of things, getting them to consume the information that you're doing, and slowly start shifting the narrative as you move forward. And that could then create the change that you intend to. I mean, it's really difficult because we spoke about this sort of ane pau kind of thing that sort of surrounds the queer community. And yes, there was a time, and yes, there are still situations that are quite dire that needs to be addressed, and that requires people's empathy towards it. But that doesn't represent everyone in the community, and it doesn't capture all of the voices. So it's a tough call, Tarind. It's just, and I don't find it right or wrong to like sort of pandering to whatever that is happening, as long as you authentically understand what you're trying to do. If you're trying to sell something, great, that's your goal. If you're trying to push an information forward, finding your value system and how you want to communicate, just because you don't get as many followers or as much reach, if you can convert a few amount of people that really believes in what you're saying, that itself is a win than having a lot of followers or a lot of people being sort of shifted towards one end or another. Hopefully that helps. I mean, it's a question about if the ends, if the end justify the means kind of situation. Like if at the end of the day, if you still get people to sign up for a petition that is going to go into parliament and show 2 million signatures, does it really matter if you're talking about sort of violence, empathy, or what it is? Because I mean, it's the individual storyteller's ethics and values. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I have been tasked with taking you through your application process for the fellowship. One second. All right, so let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is basically going to help your concept note and the breakdown of your project. This part of it is self-explanatory. Okay, so just to start off with, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an introduction about who you are, where you come from, what makes you you, why have you decided to sort of venture on this path, anything that would tip, anything that would help us like you more and trust and believe in who you are, and sort of feel for you. So give us an introduction about yourself. And if you can change one thing in the world, what would that be? Just one thing. And then tell us a little bit about your project. So what we're looking for here is, tell us about what your campaign is and where did the inspiration come from? What is your background and what is the basis for your work? So do you have a personal experience? Does it come from something that someone that you know has been struggling with? Is it something that you have a passion for? So give us a little bit of information about the project in terms of where it comes from. And then go into what are your objectives and what do you hope to achieve at the end of your campaign. Tell us a little bit about if you are looking at changing something. Are you trying to retain an existing sort of situation? Or are you trying to sort of then, one second. Or are you trying to improve a current situation? Next, tell us who your audience is and who are you trying to sort of move in this direction. Tell us a little bit about their demographics in terms of age, if they identify with a particular gender, if you know their sort of, give us a little bit about their audience profile, go into a little bit of details about what sort of they like, dislike, what kind of platforms do they use, etc. And then tell us about what are the platforms that you hope to reach your audience and what would then indicate the success of your campaign. How would you measure it? How would you measure that you have reached the goals that you set out to do? So similar to the presentation, under each, like when you're planning it under each objective, write down how are you going to measure your success based on each objective. So give us the indicators and then give us how do you hope to sort of understand that. Then give us a breakdown of your activity, which I will get to. There's an entire project breakdown template that we've provided, which will help you outline your project activities and also develop a budget for it. So then also tell us a little bit about how does your project contribute to the overall goal of the program in terms of how is it advocating for LGBT lives. All right, so this is your project breakdown. Basically, your name, put down the main activity, and then each piece under that. What is going to be your key message? So we've done an example here so that you would understand. Give us the target group of it, that particular activity. What is the platform that you're going to be running it? And what are your indicators of success? What would you be looking at by pushing this piece of information forward? Is it going to be promoted? If so, what's the budget that you're looking at? And then there is a timeline to when you would be producing your work. There's a budget template as well. So it just needs an activity description about that particular cost. Are you charging it by piece? Is it by is it a bulk amount? What is it? And then price per unit, number of units, total. This I think is explanatory as well. So these are the three pieces that we're looking for in the application. And your job would be to sort of see, the more you have thought about your project, the more work you have put into your project in terms of ideating it, the better it will come across to us. So Zainab would give you, I think you guys have about 14 days to decide how you're going to be looking at it. Just a couple of tips on that is that if your existing work, one second. So if you have an existing campaign that is running and or an existing project or a frame of work that you're doing, this could be a part of that work. This campaign or this project can be simply sort of an additional piece that you're doing. So you don't have to then compromise your existing sort of brand or values that you have. Simply, this will be a add-on or a sort of supplement to the work that you're already doing. So based on all of this, is there any other questions that you have for me? No?
Quite clear for now. I'll contact you if any problems.
Huh? Sorry?
Clear for now. If I do come
Great.
across any issues, I'll let you know.
Okay, so if anyone needs any more further clarification or you need any help with strategizing your campaigns, let me share my email. You can drop me an email and we can set up a time between the 2 weeks to discuss if anyone has any, if anyone needs any help with sort of framing your concept note and things like that. So very informally, does anyone really don't have anything else to clear up? Because then we can end the session or bring the session to a close.